Today's episode of the Riderflex podcast is sponsored by our friends at Rocky's Venture Club, an angel investing group dedicated to accelerating economic development by educating and connecting investors and entrepreneurs. Their mission is to advance economic development in the Rocky Mountain region. On today's episode of the Riderflex podcast, we have guest Heather Potters. She's the vice chairman and co-founder of PharmaJet. They're a private drug delivery technology company which has developed a family of patented proprietary needle-free injection technologies. Heather Potters on the Riderflex podcast. How you doing, Heather?
Super. It's great to be part of your event today.
No, I appreciate you being here. Really cool. We met through some folks over at Rocky's Venture Club. Barbara Bauer, I think, introduced us maybe, so it was very nice of her. She was on the podcast before. I appreciate her doing that.
Actually, I have to share a secret that Rocky's Venture Club is a significant investor for PharmaJet. So Barbara and her team really appreciate them.
That's where the tie-in is. Okay, because we also sponsor. Sometimes they're a sponsor for us on the front end of the podcast. So I'll have to make sure Scott knows that. So when we put it out, they get the sponsorship little clip at the beginning. I'll have to make sure we do that. Okay, cool. Very nice of our friends at RVC and Barbara when you listen to this, guys. Thank you. So I studied you last night, this morning. I was stalking you and trying to figure out everything I could. Love your background and the story. And by the way, some of those YouTube videos you guys got up on the PharmaJet YouTube channel, pretty powerful stuff. So I can't wait to get into it. Before we get into PharmaJet, though, why don't you tell the listeners about Heather, the person, like early life, family stuff, where you grew up, walk us into college, stuff like that.
Okay. Wow. Back to the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm actually originally from Colorado.
Okay.
And, very proud to be part of this state. And yet I had a really unusual upbringing. So I had quite a lot of international exposure, travel, living abroad, studying abroad, during kind of some of my formative early years. And my parents actually did quite a lot of international travel, volunteer medicine and dentistry and things. And then, before you know it, you add your grandparents and where everybody comes from. And everything that I ever studied in college and graduate school had an international focus because I knew that I wanted to have a career abroad. Okay. So I'm a wheat ridge farmer, for those of you who know where Wheat Ridge High School is.
How about that? All right, cool.
College to California, like in the middle of whatever month it snowed 3 feet, and I thought, California, here I come.
Why Claremont, by the way? Well, any specific reason?
So Claremont McKenna College, just as it was changing from Claremont Men's School, kind of funny.
I see.
To be small, sleepy place that was perfect with small class sizes. And truth is I probably only went to the beach twice during my whole time there.
Really?
But I learned actually, careful what you wish for, because LA is a big place. And comparison to Colorado, relatively, we get, unhappy with a little tiny bit of traffic, and you can be on a highway for 3 hours and never leave the city there. So it was a wonderful experience. And then fast forward pretty quickly, I headed off to business school. In between time, I started some of my first entrepreneurial activity. I think in my family, everything was always, hurry up and go to the next thing. So as much as that was, kind of a helpful experience for us, the truth is I went to the other coast, to Pennsylvania, and went to the Wharton School.
I saw
that. I was part of their international cohorts as well. And it was quite a big program with a lot of foreigners anyway, but I quickly oriented myself to find a job abroad. And when I graduated, it was in 1991, I had already been to visit Poland just as the wall came down. So in between years of business school.
Okay, cool.
It really struck me that the people there were so nice and engaging and hardworking. And in the back of my mind, I thought, wouldn't it be great if you could do something to help well, the truth is that that concept of privatization was coined about the same time that I was finishing school.
Huh.
And one of the professors in our school was tasked with trying to develop a roadmap around how to bring Central and Eastern Europe forward, support its private sector development. And I became part of the first fund that was established thanks to the leadership of President Bush Sr. and the chairman of Bear Stearns and Dillon Reed. And that effort created something called the enterprise funds, where it was US government money allocated to fixed closed-end funds that were independently managed. So in other words, the objective was make sure that you get an ROI. We're not just giving away money, but it was government money to take the risk in a place that had virtually no private sector. So I landed in Warsaw in May in 1991.
Wow.
When all chaos, had broken loose because they'd freed prices and frozen wages, and everybody was on a street corner selling something.
Where were you living? Were you like in an apartment downtown by yourself? Did you have any friends, family there?
Well, because housing was really hard to come by, multi-generations living, together in small quarters. Somebody had already basically taken the task on to knock on somebody's door and ask if they wanted to rent their apartment. So I moved into a furnished apartment that was probably about the size of twice my kitchen. A bed, a very small bathroom, a very small kitchen, and a closet. And it was on the 17th floor. And oftentimes the elevator didn't work.
Holy cow.
A few blocks away from the office. And we actually, the office space that we had was in the former Communist Party headquarters. And we moved in together with Arthur Anderson and the plans to start up a stock exchange. And it was really, a remarkable time.
I bet.
22 days to wire money. There was no infrastructure relatively. It took, you couldn't call across the street if your life depended on it until, later in the evening when the circuits were clear.
No internet. No internet. It's not like you're Googling. It's not like you're Googling, hey, where's a cool restaurant?
No, it was a bit grungy. Yeah. And I lived without heat and water my first probably 18 months and over time moved 5 times, but it was really hard to find housing. And so as people decided to try and rent their places, because that was the first market to get developed, increasingly, moved a little bit away from the city and eventually ended up building a house.
Okay.
But,
really?
I spent 20 years altogether living and working and investing in Central and Eastern Europe from Warsaw.
Wow. Okay. Do you still have property there?
I do, actually.
Wow. Very nice.
We have a family farm that we renovated over time. It's in the north part of the country in a beautiful lake district.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Okay. If I ever need to travel over there, I'll call you. I'll be like, hey, well, who's in the farm this weekend?
Yeah, I gotta write things down. Yeah.
Did you plan on getting into private equity, enterprise investing? Like, was that your plan in school, or it just kind of happened?
It kind of happened, although I kind of had my eye on it. I was not, the top of the class in the finance, kind of classes or finance world. So many people had come from Wall Street. So I think, truly my background had been more oriented towards marketing. I actually taught an undergraduate class at Wharton, which was a bunch of fun. But the other alternative that I had was to move to Sydney, Australia and work for Procter & Gamble. So,
wow.
you kind of come to that yellow brick road and you get
Yep.
to choose one side or the other side. And in my mind, when I was in Poland, I mentally said, I give this 6 months because it might not work out. But really quickly things started to normalize, and it was just fascinating. It was light speed, basically.
When you would come back home and your friends would complain about little tiny stuff, right? Like they complain that their flavor of soda wasn't at the store today, and they're mad about little tiny stuff. And you'd been over there, you're like, listen, let me tell you something. No hot water, no heat, 17 flights of stairs. I can tell you some other story.
Yeah, I don't suffer whiners very well, but in Poland when I arrived, the I was, again, the first foreigner out of, maybe there were 18 people already kind of hired, local team of Polish people. And the term to jest problem, meaning it's a problem, was the answer to everything that you asked. And I quickly became one of those people that was just irate, like, we are going to fix this. We're going to figure out a way over the barrier, around the barrier, under the barrier. And I think, you know, I developed some skills, frankly, that probably aren't very attractive, in the sense that if somebody says you can't, the first thing, my reaction is, of course I can't. Right? What do you mean I can't do that? And yet at the same time too, life is hard. So being able to be gracious and accepting that there were limitations, but you know, no whiners allowed, meaning that if the garbage needed to be taken out, you take the garbage out, right? This is not something where it's a glamorous assignment. And if you're not prepared to kind of buckle down and just live with the circumstances that, you know, we're in, it doesn't seem like you're fit. So it wasn't for everyone, but there ended up actually, out of my class, being at least a good 15 of us, maybe 20 of us, that went off to positions in that area basket of countries, like the IFC, the World Bank, other organizations, and we all had very similar experiences. And it was really, you know, most people would say it was remarkably wonderful, and probably about half the people stayed.
Oh, is that right? Okay,
yeah.
I see. All right.
Yeah.
And you were over there for 20 years in various roles?
Yes.
Wow, that is a long time. Okay. All right. So when did you come back to the States? Walk me through that career period where you're like, okay, somebody finally pulled you back this way.
Well, I think there was there were probably two occasions, two natural periods where I kind of had a check-in with the rest of the world, because you couldn't make a phone call, right? You had to have a satellite phone to get out of the country for the first few years until telecom started to improve a little bit. It was interesting to me that after the first major primary investment period of about 6 years, I checked in with people and said, well, what do you think? And everyone said to me, are you kidding? Central and Eastern Europe is the place to be. And that, you know, kind of reconfirmed, you know, from the outside perspective, that I wasn't living on some little island, you know, that my experience would be useful for the future.
Gotcha.
And then after substantially investing my third fund, and realizing that the natural evolution for a fund manager is you go raise fund 4, right? And you invest quite a lot, and then you go raise your next fund.
Okay. Okay.
So
you answered
sorry. On top of each other.
Okay.
I just realized that you kind of come to this place where there's a point of no return, which is, if you do that, you kind of need to sign up to stay your adult life, right? You have a career perspective that is, you know, there's a transition time that's appropriate and one that's probably not. So money in, money out tended to be about 13 years of time, double what it would be in the United States. So if you imagine, again, the layer cake, and you stack these onto each other, I started to think very seriously about diversifying my way out of Poland and Central and Eastern Europe. And I began investing in a few other things. And that's when PharmaJet kind of happened. And it used to be a bit of a trade secret, but I co-founded PharmaJet with my mother.
Okay.
My mother's a healthcare professional by training. She had experience, again, in kind of the venues where immunizations were given, and had seen that needles were a problem. So when the concept of creating a needle-free technology to help address needle stick and reuse and pass along disease came about, that was courtesy of the World Health Organization kind of giving a call to action for the world. Could somebody develop a needle-free technology, please? My mother called me and she said, I really want to do this. Will you help me? So I thought about all of the things that were meaningful to me, where you could make an investment, make a great return, and then see some paradigm shift as a result of that investment. Today, everybody calls it impact, but it was way before impact was designed. Those are meaningful things. And when we thought about how we could create a technology that would be able to be used in any environment, whether or not it was a sophisticated clinic or a field environment in a difficult, country. We thought, gosh, it's a huge market opportunity. If we only get a part of the way there, right? We can do some good along the way. We can create a great business, and it's the right thing to do. So that was then, and this is now, and even though it's taken us a little bit longer, we indeed have proven out a lot of the things that we wanted to do.
Because you started it, did you form the company in 05?
Yes, in the middle of 05. Yeah, we've done a little bit of homework in advance, kind of went to meet all the people in the world that were, having anything to do with needle-free or drug delivery. So some market surveillance about, should we do this? How should we do this? And
just like
everybody said you won't be successful.
oh, really? Wow. Okay. And was there anybody doing it, by the way? Any competitors already?
At the time there were a few companies that had devices focused on things like insulin, so home use, personal use.
All right.
And there were a few devices that had, I call them the $10,000 drug, devices, but they were aiming at very expensive drug delivery that
I see.
As an individual, you'd never know what the device costs.
I see.
And
okay.
For us, we thought, the immunization market's growing in perpetuity. It'll never stop. So the number of children being born and the number of vaccines they receive forevermore. And then a problem with safety. The WHO had observed that somewhere between 40 and 70% of needles were being reused in certain places.
That stat blows me away, by the way. I heard you mention that on another podcast. And I thought, what? Wow, that is crazy. I never thought it would be that.
So when we, again, spoke to some of these people, they said, well, vaccines don't have any money. Why would you ever want to do that? They were the $10,000 drug guys, right? Focused on the really high-end stuff.
Okay.
And taking a percentage of that revenue stream from that drug. And then on the other side, the devices that were being used for things like insulin, they were engineered to reach the subcutaneous tissue. And
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, so we have 3 layers in our body. This is theoretically the tissues. You've got the skin at the top, right? The dermal layer.
Okay.
Then you have the fatty tissue in between, which is subcutaneous, and then you have the intramuscular tissue below.
Okay.
So
all right.
In the vaccine world, when we started, nearly every single vaccine was delivered into the muscle. It had to reach the muscle in order to work.
Interesting.
And so with fluid dynamics, when you create a fast fluid stream, you need it to go deeply enough that it reaches the muscle, but you also don't want it to be like a bullet, right? You want it to be comfortable for the patient. And all of the other devices that were being used for things like insulin, they told us, well, we don't think you can engineer an intramuscular device. And so their mental limitation was, good luck with that, right? And they were also orienting themselves to, frankly, originally being something that could be reused. In other words, the syringe, we call it a syringe, it just doesn't have a needle on it. It has a little hole where the fluid goes through. Mm-hmm. They were encouraging the reuse of the syringe because if it was your insulin in your body and no other users, that would be fine and it would lower the average cost for you as a patient. In our case, the World Health Organization had asked to make sure that syringe would never be able to be reused. So in other words, it needed to be auto-disabled after each use. So when we set up the kind of approach, we saw lots of volume use, meaning a single non-reusable syringe for every single immunization. And then again, the growth in the birth cohort, the growth in the number of vaccines, the fact that needles are problems, they have needle stick associated with them, potential pass-along disease. So all of these extra features that put really vaccine delivery into a specific category.
So your ability to be able to convince people this is needed and sell it got stronger over time. Did you teach yourself all of this medical stuff before, or some of the funds that you had managed and invested in before were in the healthcare space and you knew some of this terminology? I'm just curious.
Well, I always, you know, by osmosis, got all the healthcare stuff because I come from a family full of healthcare people, you know,
Okay.
doctors and nurses and hygienists and everybody, you know, in healthcare. But I think, you know, indeed, some of the investments that I looked at in the Central and Eastern European area include things like hospitals and, you know, et cetera.
Okay. Okay. And would you and your mom were the first, did you and your mom put money in first? So you guys quote
Yes.
bootstrapped this, so to speak, at first, and then,
Right.
okay. All right. And did you give up all the responsibility that you had managing other funds and other people's money at that time, or were you trying to do both at first?
Well, I was doing both at first in the sense that I had fully invested my fund and the focus was, you know, exit over time.
Okay.
And so I had a little bit of time to do other things. And it's, you know, we spent the better part of a year kind of walking around and really studying about the market and market opportunity and even speaking with the World Health Organization.
Okay.
And then we formed the company. But the, you know, my mental view is I was going to be the chairman, kind of like, you know, looking after the portfolio of private equity investments that I had. You sit on the board, you're a good fiduciary.
Right.
And that over time, we would just have a dynamite medical device qualified team. And in the early days, you know, where it's, you're doing a lot of bench testing and range finding and prototyping. It's not really a business, right? It's a company, but it's not, you know, like this. So my mother was here on the ground all day, every day, and she and the engineers would work together to make sure that our prototyping and testing was going okay. But our combined view, we always knew that we would need, you know, really qualified medical device team that could help us build and grow the business. So in 2009, 10, just taking us back in history, we had just received our first FDA approval in 2009 during the H1N1 crisis.
Had you raised any cash before that FDA approval?
Yeah, we had actually, and so my money, my parents' money. Can't leave my dad out of this, otherwise.
Okay.
And then I included in a convertible note structure many of my fellow co-investors in the region. We all did club deals, and some of my successful entrepreneurs, right? Because
did they all get in? Did they all get in before the FDA approval?
Yes, they did.
Oh, nice.
So when we received our FDA approval and H1N1 was just starting to become a concern about a pandemic, we had a small opportunity to work with Homeland Security in New Jersey in the public health venues to deliver flu shots. Cool. And it was a remarkable time because we were able to see that not only did more people stand in the needle-free line, but we got about 20% more out of the vials, and the vaccines were in short supply. So the nurses were, you know, pretty intrigued of oh my gosh, you know, this can save so much money, or we can immunize so many more people. And then, you know, a simple push and click. We had several patients that were unbelievably needle phobic, who had to have an injection as a requirement of their jobs and positions. And that's when it really became very apparent of this is going to work out.
That was your moment. That was your moment. Where, okay. Yeah, that felt good. That trip felt good. I can see you. You're there. You're watching this whole thing unfold going, okay, I think we got some. We may have something here. Very good. Can I ask you real quick? I got to ask you, was the company at that, are we talking like set up legit, ops agreement, cap tables, even though it's your mom, you guys got all these documents, or was it like, oh, it's just my mom, so it's kind of loose? I'm just curious.
No, we had everything from day one because that's my professional standard. Yeah, we had it.
Thank you. Good tip for the listeners right there. For anybody, we'll just take a pause right there. Let me just tell you right now, I don't care if it's your best friend or if it's your cousin or if it's your mom or your dad. If you are starting a business, I highly recommend that you get your operating agreement in check, that you have a clean cap table with who has what units. And my definition of an operating agreement is this: if the crap hits the fan, it lays out what happens and who does what. And that's what it's designed to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's a perfect example where Heather's saying, hey, I started a business with my mother, and I made sure I had this stuff in line because it's critical. So good tip for the listeners right there. I just wanted to ask about that. Okay. So you're off and running now. Now you're off and running. What year was that, by the way? The story you just told, what year was that when the nurses kind of had the moment?
So that was the fall of 2009.
Okay. All right. Very good. So how about this? Let's skip forward just a bit here and give us this, because I could keep you on the phone for like 4 hours and start asking a bunch of questions about all the people scared of needles. And by the way, why wouldn't you stand in the needleless line? Like, why would you not do that? I don't, that's, can you
There's
do
always
this?
one or two.
Right. There is, right. I was starting to think, why wouldn't you? I don't understand. Can you give us the PharmaJet elevator pitch overview as it stands today? Just give us a fresh overview for all the people that have no idea of what we're talking about. Go for it.
You bet. So we are a needle-free jet injection technology, and jet means that there's a fast fluid injection that goes into your body in less than 1/10 of a second. We have 2 device platforms that cover all tissue depths, so intramuscular and subcutaneous in one platform and intradermal in the other. They are fully scaled and validated, which is a big word in FDA speak, meaning that they are audited. We have volume production with robotics. We've chosen a contract manufacturing relationship so that we don't need to own the building, but we own the technology.
Cool.
And we manufacture in Wisconsin with a group called Philips MedSize. We are now working on our second capacity increase, which will be in Singapore, with a group called Univac. We have achieved all of our critical regulatory credentials like FDA, CE mark, World Health Organization approval. We are the first and only jet injection technology to do that.
Very cool.
Plus, we have registration in 42 other countries with 50 more underway. We have 47 issued patents and more pending, and new claims always being filed.
Okay, so let me just stop you right there. Is the so the attorney that you've been using for all this lives in a giant mansion somewhere?
Actually, he's pretty good value for money. We're not big spenders. So.
Okay. All right, go ahead. You were telling patents and all that. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
We have a bunch of trade secrets, frankly, because what we do is really hard. So if you consider that we compete with needles, we have a bit of a razor-blade approach. So our syringes are disposable. We have filling adapters that attach to vials that allow you to download any medicine. And then the injectors are long life. We've tested them to 30,000 uses without failure. Cool. So they're fractional pennies per injection. Mm-hmm. The ability for us to essentially serve all vaccine administration through our devices, which are optimized for vaccine delivery. Sorry for the dogs in the background.
That's all right. That's all right. Today, people understand with podcasts and everybody working from home, it's all good.
And so we have, in general, a lot of these kind of, I call them, the foundation pieces, the core foundation to what we do. And we are now at commercial state, but because of the fact that we have that foundation, plus we've completed several clinical studies, and we've been involved in 60 human clinical studies that have been completed to date, 70 more in process. And that's a big deal because, Steve, where the claims come from, where I can highly recommend, for instance, that you go get your flu shot, is because we actually did the studies, filed with the FDA, and have the ability to promote for that we've studied it. Everybody, it's safe, it's efficacious, and it's non-inferior to needles. We're also the only needle-free jet injection technology that has a claim of generating a superior immune response using a fractional dose. So we're part of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, where we've demonstrated through studies led by the WHO and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and CDC that 60% less injected into your skin is superior in immune response to a full dose into your muscle.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Somebody that's in charge of expenses is hearing that going, yeah, that's good. Yes. Why not do that?
Right. Ka-ching, right. We save in polio vaccine in the poorest of countries competing against 5-cent needles. we save a full 30% for
How
every
about that?
immunization back for the user. And in part, we get 20% more out of the vials. So remember that early aha during the H1N1 scenario. We also don't have any needles to get rid of, so we don't have expensive sharps disposal. We don't really leave behind hazardous trash. And it's a very fast process. So push and click, you can process patients typically 2 to 3 times faster than needle delivery.
Why aren't we using this everywhere right now? Like why are we still using needles? I'm listening to you describe this and I'm thinking, okay, this is a no-brainer. Well, what are we waiting on? Tell me, is it a scaling, bandwidth, can't produce enough? What do you have back orders for 2 years? What's the situation?
Well, it's a combination of things. So during our 2011 era, just after we had scaled our primetime device, the FDA changed the entire regulatory landscape and said, now you need to go do clinical claims, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
if anybody knows what the word force majeure is, right, out of nowhere, all of a sudden the rules changed, which caused us several years of additional work.
Oh.
So the concept of clinical claims for the example that everybody knows is you're listening to the news in the morning, then they have this commercial and a happy family running through the park, and then this asthma remedy that they advertise. And then at the end, they go slowly and talk about how if you take this product, you might die and you might stop breathing, right?
Yeah.
That's an example of a clinical claim because during that clinical study, that's what happened. In other words, the FDA wanted to make sure that the drug makers were very transparent that some of these drugs aren't completely safe. So we have clinical claims, and the good news is nothing happened, right? We're the same as a needle and syringe. Everybody is safe. It's effective, et cetera. And so we're able to walk through the door and talk about those things because we have regulatory approvals for that purpose. And while that was really hard and expensive to navigate, and generally all drugs and all devices are now subject to the same thing. What it's done is it's created a competitive barrier for anyone to try and follow PharmaJet. So we estimate that we're 5 to 8 years ahead of anyone who would like to try.
Okay, very good. So a nightmare situation actually turned into a silver lining blessing. When that happened to you during that first few months when that was happening and the rules changed and you're like, oh shit, okay, so now whatever our expense budget was, forget that. Now we got to you're having to do this major pivot. Were there some dark nights there where you're like, okay, I don't know if we can do it. I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. Were there a few of those nights?
Oh, all the time. It was probably because of my experience in Central and Eastern Europe and very clearly Poland specifically because I lived there. There was force majeure that happened every day. And so it wasn't that it was just normal because that wasn't okay, right? In other words, you needed to figure out how to fix it or get beyond the barrier or go a different direction. But when this happened, it's like calling in the Avengers. You call in the A-team. And we had already developed several collaborations that were really meaningful, like with the World Health Organization and the CDC and many of our customers, we all kind of, we were not only perplexed about why this had happened, but it was like, oh, let's figure out how we can fix this.
Yeah.
So today the FDA is an official reference for us, and we're really proud of the fact that we've created some stunning data, first and onlys, and it's given us again this silver lining of a position that we don't think there'll be another PharmaJet.
Are you still in the scale up, burn cash, have to get investors mode, or are you generating enough revenue now to where you can run it, you break even, or where are you at? I don't know how much you want to share, but I'm just curious as to kind of where you're at in the life cycle.
Sure, I'll share some general kind of feedback. In my experience, with looking at a number of medical device pharma businesses, like science is glacial. It takes a long time to get through all the regulatory processes. So typically what you see in those companies is that early revenue, they're not profitable for a very long time until they hit their stride. And at the same time, they're usually investing, right? It's more layers and more layers and more layers, because once you get to this stage out here, it tends to be a diversified, offering of additional products. So we're revenue generative. We are not yet profitable. We're pretty close. And we're always adding people to the cap structure. One of the, kind of, my middle name is fundraising, right?
I was just about to ask you, I'm like, let me guess, your 90% of your job today is either raising cash or managing the cap table or updating equity holders and blah, blah, blah.
Yes, a lot of that. And I'm a fiduciary in the sense that I'm an investor, I'm on the board, I take that really seriously.
Yeah.
And we've raised money only from high net worth and family office investors to date, although we're really closely finalizing kind of we'll call it an institutional round, although some of it's high net worth money. But it's important to find the right money and the right alignment, and that's my job. So we're nearly there.
When that became a big part of your job, when the cap table started blowing up, and you're dealing with lots of different people here and money coming from various places, is that when you said, okay, listen, the day-to-day, I need a CEO besides myself because I need to help over here? Is that why you eventually brought in somebody else as the CEO? Because I think you brought in somebody from the outside for that, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
indeed, over time. I don't think actually my mother and I ever took kind of formal titles that way.
Okay.
We always knew we needed third parties. And, we've had over time, I guess you'd say virtually 100% turnover, but that's been over about a 15-year period of time.
Yeah.
And certain people in our early days were truly helpful and wonderful. And yet, you're always trying to find better people or different experiences for different stages of a business. However, we have a really solid team. My executive team has worked together for the last 7 to 10 years.
Great.
Our current CEO has been promoted from within. He's a tremendously capable engineer and operating person. His name is Chris Capello. Yeah, so we never intended to be, kind of the long-term, fully in charge founders. And my mother's 79, so she's retired, right? She's still in good health, but it was time to pass the torch, and I'm still part of this. I'm a bit younger than she is.
Does she come to the board meetings?
No, she doesn't, but she's warmly welcomed, of course, whenever she wants to show up.
Does she say, hey, send me the financials, send me the quarterly financials? Does she ask for any documents?
No. I think in the, again, the early days, we spent a lot of time on those things. And she actually, she ran my father's practices. So she's got a business background and a healthcare background. But today, as much as we're not a large corporation, we are absolutely a corporation. We and have from the beginning quarterly board meetings. Many of my key shareholders occupy some of those seats. We have a few independents that have medical device experience, vaccine experience. My shareholder base, is extensive, but for me personally, because it's a personal thing, right? It's a personal investment. It's a personal alignment. It's a personal commitment. Doesn't matter how much somebody's invested. My door's always open. So
yeah, I know it can be a full-time job. I had a friend of mine that I won't mention his name on here, but at some point he was dealing with 90 people on his cap table, and I was having happy hour with him, and he just said, "Man," he said, "I'll never let it get that big again if I ever start something else."
Sometimes best laid plans don't work out, but there was a period in the world, and we're in it again, where in 2008-9 the venture market got wiped out. No, it's 8, 9, 10, 11, frankly, right? And many times those gaps have been filled by high net worth in a multiple of companies, not just PharmaJet, and particularly also at that time, because the FDA changed all the regulations, the venture community was not interested in medical technology for a while.
Is there any chance that when I go get my COVID shot, because there's a vaccine that that somebody's going to be using your device, sticking me in the arm with your device? Is there a chance of that or no?
We're super hopeful. There are no promises, but we have now 18 documented coronavirus candidates being advanced with PharmaJet.
Very nice.
Touching 9 countries and jurisdictions, geographies around the world. And the truth is there's a certain category of our activities that are around the development of novel vaccines. So they're not our vaccines, but our devices, in certain cases, that fast fluid injection helps shock the cells and make those vaccines work better than needles. So it's not 100% of the cases, but in particularly nucleic acid, DNA, messenger RNA, that's what we've seen so far. So chances are we can be part of some of these solutions. 3 of those are at clinical stage, meaning the human testing stage, out of 30 in the world.
Are any of the vaccine companies investors, partners? Do you have those kind of relationships or no? I don't know if you can mention that.
We have 2 small relationships. I mean, they're related parties, but one of our vaccine development partners in Asia, after they had completed some testing and signed a license agreement with us, asked if they could make a small investment in PharmaJet. And so I'm proud to say that they are investors, and they don't have any special rights, but for us, it was really a nice recognition of we must make their stuff work better, right? That we add some value to what they do. And then we have some discretionary small commitments from professional investors, meaning, the venture community and their day job, but discretionary allocations that are not necessarily part of their fund. And then we have the Rockies Venture Club, not only the underlying individuals, but also their fund as an investor, as an example.
Nice. Very good. Very good.
Few outliers and hybrids, but at the end of the day, very significant personal interactions with our shareholders.
Sounds like a wonderful 15-year journey that's had some ups and downs, but really lots of wins in here for you. And now you're really at that tipping point, pretty damn close to this tipping point, right?
Yes, we are.
And soon you're gonna probably be on the hockey stick of profitability pretty soon after all those years of investing, right? Then you won't have those investors calling you going, "Hey, when do I get my money back?"
Well, the world's a big place, and I call it my grand plan of global domination. We're not done yet.
Congratulations on everything you've done with it so far. Really outstanding. And I love the fact that, in my mind, in layman's terms, like I said, I just view it as like, why wouldn't you use that versus a needle? Unless you're calling me a hospital or whoever the customer is, and you're saying it costs 10 times more to use your stuff than the needle, unless that's the conversation, there's no reason why they shouldn't do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and everybody's a little bit different. So I appreciate the concept, because if you're the business guy and you're only looking at dollar and cents, or versus you're the logistics person and you're only looking at how to deploy it and train,
gotcha.
Versus the caregiver, you all have different views. And the one example that I would offer in the rest of the world is our polio channel is stunning. It's a 300 to 500 million annual dose need for the next couple of decades. And we have had experience in places like Pakistan, which is an endemic polio country where the polio virus is in the water and the sewage systems. So we, it was joyous for us. It was hands off. We trained over WebEx, but we trained 50 master caregivers in week 1. They trained 1,100 teams, and the following week they immunized 500,000 children door to door in 5 days. 99% approval from patients and caregivers, and then 18% more people showed up. And that's the cool thing, right? Which is, why aren't we using this everywhere? Well, most people probably don't like needles, and that probably inspires a few extra participants.
Really good stuff. Really awesome stuff. By the way, have you ever met Bill Gates?
Not personally, but I'm pretty sure he was the person they added to the phone call and the camera in the corner when I was at the foundation.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
No, but
Awesome.
he's actually a personal supporter of our activities. He's been very integral in the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. Yes.
Yeah, I watched the special on Netflix or whatever, the special with him, and trying to just get fresh water and water for sewage and stuff that I recently saw, and that was emotional for me. I told my wife, I'm like, we just take so many things for granted over here. I mean, we go to the restroom, we just flush the toilet, we don't even think about it, right? And I watched that special. That was emotional for me. That really was. I was like, man, we are spoiled over here.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And I think it's really thanks to his leadership in a lot of places that we're all more aware.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think that the internet's only kind of really been an active tool for 25 to 30 years, CompuServe was kind of tail end of the 90s. And then, what was it? The AOLs and the things, they progress towards it's everywhere, right? Everybody thinks it's their God-given right to have a phone.
Right.
Right. And be able to finance the phone and the car and the house and everything. I think the recent statistic I read was 3 billion people have limited access to water and soap.
That stuff it blows me away. It makes me feel bad that I'm not doing enough to make a difference in people's lives like that too, which is, I feel like I'm not giving back enough when I hear stories like that. Gosh. Well, I'm glad that you're part of that. You're part of that playing field, right? You're having those conversations with people like him doing that. That's a wonderful thing. With 2 last questions here. I know we're almost out of time. You've had such a wonderful career already. I mean, you've just done so many awesome things. But if you could call the young lady out in California getting ready to, get her bachelor's degree, and you could tell her anything, what would you say to her right now today, knowing what you know?
Oh, goodness. I think I would have reminded her that most of the time the path is right in front of you and you have the opportunity to choose to be bold and take it or not. And some people are not very self-motivated, right? So we all get up in the morning because we have to feed ourselves and put a roof over our head and things like that. And life is hard. However, sometimes it's just right in front of you. And some people are too worried to take that leap of faith. Maybe that they lack self-confidence, or maybe if they became a little more self-aware, how subtle it is that sometimes people offer you help and you're either too proud to take it, or you just dismiss that, oh, they don't really want to help me. I didn't hear that, right? So the way in which I feel like part of the underlying success is it's show up. 80% of everything is showing up, and you never know who you're going to meet. And then the rest is really hard work. You better show up and do a good job, right? You better follow through. You need to make sure that you are distinctive, because life is competitive. And then frankly, our consumer population wants it to be perfect every single time. And the bar gets higher and higher and higher.
Right. Yeah. Let me summarize for the listeners 2 things there. When the doors are open, have the guts to walk through them. And when you do walk through them, work your ass off.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. What last question is this? If you had to put your core purpose in life into a sentence, right now, at this phase in your life today, because it was probably a different core purpose when you were 29, but right now, what is your core purpose in life if you had to summarize it for us?
I think, it's kind of a combination. Once an investor, always an investor. So I have a few things that I spend time on where I've either invested or I sit on the board. Okay. Many of which are associated with my shareholder cap structure, right? Okay. I'm always curious about what they're doing, and or they ask me, would you help us out? Mm-hmm. So when I look at the things that I spend time on, and PharmaJet is the predominant amount of my time, and I work a lot. So, you know, I steal time from the weekends and everything to fit it all in.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the technologies and the entrepreneurs that I help get behind and champion have the ability to make a huge impact in a profound way and in a positive, you know, contributions. It's not the greatest little widget that everybody's going to love just because it's a widget. There's also a clear focus around brain health that I didn't really observe before. But the fact is that, you know, we're emotional human beings, and not all of us have been given the opportunity to have the best deck of cards, or some of
That's
us
right.
have gotten hurt before, or we have family history of whatever. And so if we're able to think well, then I think that goes a long way towards being able to be creative and productive and thoughtful and emotionally well balanced. So that's one. And then on the tech side, I think there's always good things that are allowing us to either work more safely, grow farming in a more productive and, you know, water efficient way. Those kinds of impacts that can be made have to be core to what I end up getting involved in, whether or not it's spending my time or spending my money.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. By the way, if you ever need to put a few of your $1 million into a small little growing recruiting firm, I know of one. I'm just joking around. Heather, thank you so much for being on the Riderflex podcast. I really appreciate you sharing your story here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's fun. It's I like the opportunity to share our story, obviously, and I just appreciate the opportunity that you've given us today.
If you think today's tip or guest interview can help someone you know, please share this with them. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. If you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to hit that little bell next to the subscribe button so you can be notified when we release a new episode. Our show features entrepreneurs, business executives, and the stories behind how they got there, as well as daily tips on career advice and job interviews. You can visit riderflex.com to learn more about us and get information on the recruiting and consulting services we provide. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.